Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's hearing. We'll call it back into order. I think we have a couple of preliminary things that we need to do first, so that Mr. Stark has said. So who's first?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. The company is providing the verifications of testimony for the three witnesses that were excused on Friday. They are David Doss, Kendra Ward, and Jay Oliver.
Okay. We don't need to mark that. So we'll just give that to Ms. Tackett, and we'll be in good shape for that. Thank you. Anything else? What else we got? General Bowen. That'd be the best place. We've got to get you on the microphone if you're going to be heard. Punch that little, where it says push, I think.
Got it.
And the red light comes on, you should be good.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I appreciate very much you allowing us to come and present. Again, not present, but basically appear before you. As you may recall, I was at the Florence night hearing, and a number of the Farm Bureau farmers appeared and testified at that proceeding. Obviously, as you knew then and you know now, we represent Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau farmers indicated that they had a number of concerns, and some of the commissioners, as a matter of fact, suggested ways in which to try to resolve those to the extent possible. We've really sort of broken those concerns down into three buckets, if you will, and this is really, and we've got a letter that's been pre-filed, or e-filed rather, in the docket that I'll pass up and give to the court reporter, not to be put in evidence, but more to give you a status report, if you will, where the farmers are with Duke. Out of the three buckets that we had, one was try to get a representative from Duke to work with the farmers. We're way down the road on that. I think that's working out pretty well. We've talked to Duke also about the issue of trying to make sure that the number of accounts that they have, along with the number of meters and things such as that, we've agreed to go ahead and work forward with trying to get that item resolved. So those two, I think, are pretty much down the road. We think we've got resolution. The only issue that we have not got resolution on at this point is the medium general service. As y'all heard a lot at the night hearing, that was a problem. I think Duke doesn't think it's as much of a problem as we do, but we've continued and pledged on both sides to continue to do that, and we will in good faith work on that. And this is a letter I'd like to hand up, a letter that we wrote to Duke, shared with Duke's counsel, and as well as with his president this morning. Gary Spires is here from from the Farm Bureau, and of course he thanks you again, and that's all we've got.
All right, thank you, sir. Okay, anything else in a preliminary matters that we need? That's a hard word to say early in the morning, too. Okay. All right, ORS.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Dr. Roof has gone ahead and taken the stand. Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, before I begin with Dr. Roof, I meant to do this a second ago. We had the verified direct testimonies of Matthew Schellinger and Anthony Sandinato. We would ask that those be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The verified pre-filed testimony, direct testimony of Anthony Sandinato and Matthew Schellinger will be entered into the record as though given orally from the stand. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Roof, please state your full name and occupation for the commission.
My name is Dr. John C. Roof.
Wait a minute, let's get your microphone on. Yeah. There you go.
Do I need to restate that?
Probably so, just so, yeah, we're getting a nod from the back.
Okay. My name is Dr. John C. Roof. I'm a researcher and policy analyst.
Thank you. And are you the same Dr. John Roof who pre-filed 5 pages of rebuttal testimony in this docket on March 25th, 2019?
I am.
Do you have any changes, edits, or corrections to your pre-filed rebuttal testimony?
No.
And if I asked you the same questions today as those contained in your pre-filed rebuttal testimony, would your answers remain the same?
Yes.
And Dr. Roof, did you also file an exhibit as an attachment JCR1 to your rebuttal testimony?
I did.
Mr. Chairman, may I approach the court reporter?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I've just handed the court reporter a copy of Dr. Roof's rebuttal exhibit JCR1. I'd ask that it be marked for identification and entered into the record.
Okay, his rebuttal exhibit will be marked and entered into the record as number 55.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Chairman, if it pleases the commission, at this time I have a brief question and answer of Dr. Roof's testimony, which will serve as his summary, which I believe is also being handed out currently.
Okay, do you want to enter that rebuttal testimony? I don't believe we've read that into the record yet.
I'm sorry if I failed to do that. Yes, sir. I'd ask that his rebuttal testimony be read into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Okay, Dr. Roof's rebuttal testimony will be, pre-filed rebuttal will be entered into the record as though given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Roof, please summarize your educational background and professional experience.
I earned a PhD in history at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, awarded in 1976 to go with an MA from Illinois and a BA from Seattle University. For 40 years, I have engaged in policy analysis and advocacy on energy and utility issues in South Carolina, including participating as a pro se intervener in rate and rulemaking proceedings before this commission from 1979 through 2002 regarding electricity, gas, telecommunications, and transit. From 1979 to 1987, I was employed by Fairfield United Action to organize and advocate around a broad set of community issues, including licensing of VC Summer Unit 1 and South Carolina Electric and Company rate increases. I represented consumer issues on a broad range of issues before the South Carolina General Assembly from 1987 to 2011 for South Carolina Fair Share, with a particular emphasis on low-income consumers. A significant portion of that work related to regulatory policy for electric and gas and telecommunications utilities. I continue to engage in legislative and stakeholder processes on behalf of AARP South Carolina and South Carolina Appellate Legal Justice Center. I have appeared numerous times as an expert in state and federal courts, testifying on statistical analyses, social and economic matters, demography, household economics, Southern history, Southern politics, elections, redistricting, and voting rights.
Thank you, Dr. Roof. Have you previously testified before the Public Service Commission of South Carolina?
Yes, I have testified before this commission on public interest pay telephones. I am a witness. I was a witness in Duke Energy Carolina's rate case docket 2018-319E. In February of this year, I presented an allowable ex parte briefing to the commission in docket 2018-319E on the effects of the proposed rate adjustment on consumers. I presented to the commission in 1997 as it prepared proposed electric restructuring implementation process report in 1998, or actually I guess it was 97, to the General Assembly. My curriculum vitae is attached as Sir Rebuttal Exhibit JCR1.
And what is the purpose of your rebuttal testimony in this proceeding?
The South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff requested that my Sir Rebuttal testimony address the impact to the customer if the positions outlined in the rebuttal testimony of Duke Energy Progress were to be adopted by this commission. The company's rebuttal testimony asserts it is entitled to cost recovery in excess of a level reasonable to support safe, reliable, and high-quality utility service. As DEP witnesses state in rebuttal testimony, the company's actions seek to reduce regulatory lag. However, the company proposes to shift the company's risk to its customers as a result.
In your opinion, what is the important role of the Commission in this rate proceeding?
From the Commission's perspective, a rate case is not just an exercise in deciding accounting adjustments, but about balancing interests between consumers and the company and its shareholders. For many years in South Carolina, ORS shared that responsibility, but in 2018, the General Assembly removed from ORS responsibility for the financial viability of the company and economic development and job retention. That leaves the Commission to that important balancing act. Much of that balancing turns upon deciding who should bear the risks of those decisions.
Please identify the areas in the company's rebuttal testimony that focuses on the shift of risk to customers.
Much of the rebuttal testimony submitted by the company focuses on issues that entail shifting risk from itself onto customers. For example, company president Garty Tago's rebuttal testimony addresses financing deferred costs, disallowance of certain approaches to employee compensation, tripling the basic facilities charge, treatment of deferred balances, and return on equity.
Please explain the impact on customers when the risk is shifted from the company to the customer.
Let me focus on the basic facilities charge increase that has been the subject of contention, both in direct and rebuttal testimony in this case and in the 226 letters submitted by customers to the Commission. Company witness Wheeler largely portrays the increase as intended, quote, to reflect full cost recovery of the customer component identified in the unit cost study, end quote, and, quote, to minimize subsidization of customers within the rate class, end quote. In other words, it's simply an intra-class shift from high users to low users. However, front-loading customer costs also shifts the revenue risks of lower load growth, improved weatherization and efficiencies in heating and air conditioning and appliances, distributed generation expansion, and battery storage expansion from the company onto customers. Company witness Garty Tago suggests that this shift mostly affects low usage customers, such as people with vacation homes or people with second homes elsewhere in the state of South Carolina, end quote. However, DEC witness Wheeler presents clear evidence in his chart number of DEP low-income bills by usage level for household income under $30,000 that most low-income customers, including low-income seniors and renters, are low-usage customers. All of the efforts to minimize the share of low-income customers who are low-use customers is belied by simply looking at Wheeler's chart. The majority falls below the 1,214 monthly average kilowatt-hour usage. This risk shift falls on all but the higher use customers, but most heavily on low-income customers. Those who are least able to afford this increase and for whom the increase most threatens their ability to, one, pay rent or mortgages in decent, safe, and affordable housing. Two, ensure that those homes are not dark, cold, or hot, even life-threateningly so. Buy sufficient, healthy food, afford and maintain reliable transportation, and pay for all needed prescriptions and health care. Even the alternate approach offered by company witness Wheeler in response to the controversy around the basic facilities charge, which more than doubles that charge to $19.03, mitigates but far from eliminates the harm to low-income customers. Here, the balancing of risks and of fairness calls on the Commission to lower the risk shifted to low usage, especially low-income customers.
Does that conclude your rebuttal testimony?
Yes, it does.
Thank you, Dr. Roof. Mr. Chairman, Dr. Roof is available for questions from opposing counsel and the Commission.
Thank you. Okay, Walmart, Ms. Grundman. Ms. Ferguson. Mr. Neal.
Morning, Dr. Roof.
Good morning.
It's good to see you again. Again, I'm David Neal, representing the South Carolina NAACP, Coastal Conservation League, and Upstate Forever. You mentioned just now in your summary of your SIR rebuttal the testimony of Duke Energy Progress witness Wheeler
Yes.
as the justification for the proposed increase in the basic facilities charge. And is it your understanding that the sole justification offered by Duke Energy Progress for their concern about intra-class subsidization comes from their use of the minimum system method?
Well, it certainly is how they arrive at what they consider the basic number. Whether that's where their concern comes from, I suspect not.
But just restricting it to what's in Mr. Wheeler's testimony and the company's testimony, you understand that the only justification they've offered is the use of the minimum system method. Isn't that right?
Yes.
Okay. And you also referenced the allowable ex parte briefing you provided to this commission in the Duke Energy Carolinas case. As part of your analysis here, as part of that analysis, you reviewed the demographic characteristics of the Duke Energy Carolinas South Carolina service territory. Isn't that right?
Yes, I did.
Did you undertake a similar analysis for the Duke Energy Progress territory in South Carolina?
I have not done a complete analysis. I certainly have looked at a number of those numbers to see how they compare. I mean, the reality is that generally the Duke Energy Progress and the Duke Energy Carolinas demographics are roughly similar. There are more lower income folks in the DEP territory, but racial demographics, age demographics, they're all of the same order.
You mentioned that there are more people living in poverty in the Duke Progress service territory. Is that right?
Yes.
And do you have a figure for that difference?
Well, those living before the federal poverty level, it's the same number, 18%. But more live at below 200% of the federal poverty level. In DEC, it was 35%. In DEP, it's 40%.
And from your analysis and experience, do you agree that low-income households on average use less electricity per month than their higher-income counterparts?
Well, from my analyses, from those of witness Howitt, from other things I have read, and now we have Duke's witness Wheeler making absolutely clear in his testimony that in the DEP service area, lower income customers use less electricity. Not all of them, of course, but certainly, if you're looking at measures of central tendency, which is what statisticians do, then lower income folks are much more likely to be lower usage folks.
And can you briefly describe the concept of energy burdens?
Well, the energy burden is a measure of the amount you spend on energy, which isn't just electricity, but of course gas, firewood, if that's how you heat your home, other forms of energy as a proportion of your income.
And in your opinion, how do increases in the fixed basic facilities charge affect customers with the highest energy burdens?
Well, it shifts. The folks with the highest energy burdens are, of course, low-income folk. And, in terms of energy usage, while that may be lower, the income is so much lower that it raises the percentage of income that's going to energy, and so have a much higher energy burden for lower income folks. So if you shift a significant portion of the bill into the basic facilities charge in a way that particularly impacts on low income folks, and it impacts low usage folks, so it particularly impacts low income folks, then you are putting a double whammy on people who already have a higher energy burden.
And I take it in preparing for your testimony that you reviewed the pre-filed testimony of Duke's president in South Carolina, Mr. Gartey-Tago?
Yes.
And do you recall Mr. Gartey-Tago's testimony regarding Duke Energy Progress's income-qualified energy efficiency program, the Neighborhood Energy Saver Program?
I recall him talking about it. I don't recall much in the way of detail.
Well, in your opinion, is that program sufficient to meet the needs of Duke Energy Progress's low-income customers?
Well, I would have to see some numbers to even begin. I mean, as a general proposition, having looked at what I can find on energy assistance programs and weatherization programs, both public and private, and by the utilities, they come nowhere near meeting the need.
And so, similarly, Mr. Wheeler testified in his rebuttal that there are other means of addressing the financial needs of low-income customers which are more effective than, quote, biasing the rate design, such as company, state, and local programs. So putting to the side Mr. Wheeler's use of the word biasing, do you agree that existing company, state, and local programs are sufficient to meet the needs of low-income customers?
Well, as a practical matter, we don't have any state programs. We have federal programs administered by the state. Those are so woefully inadequate, LIHEAP and similar, the weatherization program, that the entities, the community action programs, don't even advertise them, because by the time the advertisement hit the streets and people started showing up, the money would all be gone. I had a colloquy with the director of the state programs, and I asked him whether they even did a needs assessment, and he said no, they don't. Because there's no point. They don't have anywhere near the resources that would even come close to meeting the needs.
At this time, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to hand up an exhibit to be marked, and may I approach? What exhibit, Mr. Chairman, what exhibit number are we up to in the hearing? Thank you.
56.
Dr. Roof, I've handed you what has been marked as hearing exhibit 56. First of all, are you familiar with the National Association of State Utility Consumer Advocates, or NASUCA?
Yes.
And have you had the chance to review hearing exhibit 56, this NASUCA resolution 2015-1?
Yes.
Entitled Opposing Gas and Electric Utility Efforts to Increase Delivery Service Customer Charges. Turning your attention to, I guess, the second page of hearing exhibit 56, I take it you would, from your testimony, you would agree with this first highlighted whereas clause, that data collected by the U.S. Energy Information Administration shows that in a vast majority of regions, called reportable domains, low-income customers, those with incomes at or below 150% of the federal poverty level, on average, use less electricity than the statewide residential average and less than their higher income counterparts?
That's based on the 2009 EIA data. The REX data, which, if you ask me to tell you exactly what the REX is, it's Residential Energy Consumption Survey, I believe. The 2015 data, which I think was released in 2018, shows the same patterns. It doesn't break it down by so that you can report 150% of poverty, but if you look at the patterns for low-income usage, it's the same pattern.
And so you would agree with that,
yes,
that clause of the resolution. And skipping down to the, I'll say, I guess, the third highlighted whereas clause, could you read that for the commission?
And stop me if I'm on the wrong clause. Whereas because the imposition of high customer charges, or SFV rates, results in a smaller percentage of a customer's utility bill consisting of variable usage charges, customers' incentive to engage in conservation as well as federal and state energy efficiency programs is significantly reduced.
And Dr. Roof, do you agree with that statement?
That's Economics 101.
And do you agree that that's a relevant policy consideration for this commission to consider?
Absolutely. Both because, alternative energy sources are a large part of our energy future, but also, they will eventually, reduce the need for incumbent utilities to be building more very expensive plant.
And finally, turning your attention to page 3 of Hearing Exhibit 56, the second be it further resolved part of this resolution. If you could read that for the commission.
Be it further resolved that NSUCA urges state public service commissions to reject gas and electric utility rate design proposals that seek to substantially increase the percentage of revenues recovered through the flat monthly customer charges on residential customer utility bills. Proposals that disproportionately and inequitably increase the rates of low usage customers, a group that often includes low-income elderly and minority customers throughout the United States.
And again, I take it that's entirely consistent with your recommendation in this case?
Yes.
At this time, Mr. Chairman, I would move to enter Hearing Exhibit 56 into the record.
Hearing Exhibit 56 will be entered into the record.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Guile.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Dr. Roof. Bob Guile for Sierra Club. I think that 1979 case was one we were in together before this committee.
Yes.
Following on Mr. Neal's questions, I take it from your answers that you are aware of the cost allocation method that Duke Energy Progress proposes to use in this proceeding to justify its substantial increase in the basic facilities charge.
Yes, the minimum system methodology.
Yes. And you're aware, are you not, that proposal to adopt the minimum system methodology would represent a departure for this commission and for this company from the longstanding use of the basic customer method that had previously been used to allocate customer costs within the residential class?
Yes.
What's your opinion about the reasonableness of adopting this new method, that is the minimum system method, as a manner of allocating costs within the residential class?
Well, for rate design purposes, I think it's very problematic. Both because, from my perspective, the things that should be included in the basic facilities charge, and then some social questions raised, are the drop, the meter, and the billing. and not all of the other things that the minimum system allocation method adds into that are really part of the distribution system.
In your opinion, is it reasonable to employ the minimum system method to allocate costs to generate a basic facilities charge in this case?
Well, part of my problem with the minimum systems method is that it sort of assumes that the minimum system is the existing system. And if everyone were actually using what I've seen in low-income households in South Carolina of a light bulb in each room, we'd have a very different production system, but we also would have very different distribution system. And it sort of adds in more than you need to add in, so it unfairly allocates costs to groups of customers. And it includes things that are overall driven by volume on the system more than by just having a system.
That's helpful, but in short, use of that minimum system method reasonable or not?
I don't think so, no.
Now, since you prepared your rebuttal testimony, there's been yet another sort of throttling back by Duke of its proposed level of increase in the basic facilities charge. If I got my numbers right, we started with a jump from $9.06 to $29.18 in the initial application, throttle it back to $11.78, as you acknowledge, and I think we're now down.
No, I think you missed one.
I missed a step.
Yes.
Now back to $11.78. So there's been a response by Duke to essentially the shrieks and howls and outrage expressed, particularly in night hearings, as the Commission has acknowledged, from customers about the impacts of this change. And citing the interests of gradualism as a principle in rate making and the desire to mitigate the impacts, Duke has said, these multiple steps, that they're willing to accept less. Here's the point, though. By accepting less, they still insist that they want to change from the longstanding basic customer method to this minimum system method, with the expectation that employing gradualism, they'll simply take longer to get to the $29 plus allocated cost that they assert to support a higher basic facilities charge. Now, in the future, Dr. Roof, if we adopted this minimum system method, and then as time goes on, we adopt grid modernization or a grid improvement program, we beef up our system for smart meters, we do other things to the non-traditionally customer-related costs, what impact would that have on the long-term increases in the basic facilities charge, again, employing the proposed new method?
Well, as you raise costs in the future and you reallocate them using the same minimum system method, then that $29 goes even higher than that. And eventually, although it's described as gradualism, and frankly, the ORS witness describes his proposal as gradualism, if I go out hiking and, I get a description of the trail and it says it's a gradual trail, I don't expect a 30% grade to confront me. I mean, it's better than a cliff, which is what had been originally proposed, but it still is hardly gradualism to do a 30% increase in the basic facilities charge.
All right, so they're looking ahead with the idea that gradualism would produce over a period of time, if not right now, an increase to at least the $29 and change proposed by Duke, and perhaps greater if we add these other non-traditionally customer costs. Would that result be reasonable in your opinion?
No.
Would it then be reasonable in your opinion, Dr. Roof, for this commission in this order, in this proceeding, to formally approve Duke's change from the traditional residential cost allocation method to the minimum system method?
No.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Elliott. Mr. Smith. Company.
Good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
And so, Dr. Roof, I just want to make sure that I understand. Mr. Michael Seaman Wynn is the ORS's technical expert on cost of service. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And if I have this right, ORS has raised issues both in their testimony.
Mr. Chairman, objection. It sounds like Ms. Smith is pitting ORS witnesses against each other.
May I respond? This is open cross. They're both witnesses for the ORS. If there are inconsistencies between the ORS's witnesses, I think I have the ability to point them out, and I believe I'm within bounds to ask him about conflicts between one party's testimony.
Overruled.
And this won't take long, so I'm not going to be up here that long. So ORS has raised issues with using minimum system for rate design for establishing the basic facilities charge, correct?
Yes.
And the company has responded to that. Yes, okay. But in the expert testimony of Michael Seaman Wynn, they concluded the use of minimum system was reasonable for cost allocation. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I just want to go through that just very quickly. I have the testimony here. Can you see that, Dr. Roof?
I'm visually challenged, but I can see.
I can barely see it myself. So, and it says here, I'll go ahead and read it if that's okay. As discussed in Witness Hager, as discussed by Company Witness Hager, DEP incorporated the minimum system methodology into its cost of service as part of the application. Do you agree that says what it says?
Yes.
Okay. And here it says, just following along, ORS concluded for the purposes of this application, the methodology applied in constructing the company's cost of service, COSS, is reasonable. The methodology provides a reasonable assessment and allocation of the company's revenues, operating expenses, and rate-based items. Do you agree that says what it says?
Patently.
Okay. And so that is, I just want to make sure I understand the difference. So that's about cost allocation, how
Yes.
revenues are spread between the individual classes.
Right.
And where we've had an issue in this case is what the extent to which the company relied on that for establishing the basic facilities charge, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So two separate things.
Yes.
And so in your, is it your understanding that the company cannot change that basic facilities charge without coming to this commission?
Yes.
So in terms of the trail, you mentioned being on a trail. We were talking about gradualism, and you talked about being on a hiking trail. And so at every fork in that road, if every fork in that road on that trail is a rate case, this commission comes back. The company comes back before this commission, correct?
Yes.
And at any fork, the commission can tell the company to get off the trail, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioners. Commissioner Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Roof, once you start up a trail, sometimes it's difficult to get off, and otherwise you lose your way.
Yes.
And if the commission commits to changing its longstanding policy by moving toward a minimum system method of rate making, eventually that would lead us where?
Leads us to the top of the hill. Whether
The summit, right?
Yes.
Takes us to the summit.
Yes.
And that will further exacerbate the problems you've been talking about.
Absolutely.
And that's not a reasonable outcome, is it?
No.
It's not a fair and equitable outcome.
No.
It's a tremendous cost shift.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions? Mr. Howard.
Dr. Roof, you done a cost comparison on the basic custom and the minimum system? You done a cost analysis of what the minimum system charge would be versus the basic custom charge?
It's in somebody's testimony
What was that? Do you remember?
on, well, several of the witnesses for, I think it's witness Barnes, who arrived at a number of $9.23, although he recommends that it stay the same.
You're talking about base facility charge.
Yes.
Talking about the cost of service charge using basic customer charges plus minimum system method. Minimum system.
For other than the basic facilities charge,
Cost of service charge. What'd the cost of service be if I use we have in the past the basic customer charge versus the switch over to the minimum system method? What would that cost of service difference be?
well, since you start out with a revenue requirement before you allocate all of that, they end up the same. The question is, who's going to pay for it? And are they going to pay for it in a basic facilities charge or a volumetric charge?
Well, really, it'd make no difference in which method we use, according to your analogy. Once we get the revenue requirement, then the cost of service has nothing to do with it. We've already used that in the cost of service. I mean, in the basic revenue charge. So what my question to you is, what difference does it make whether, in your analogy, what difference does it make whether we use the basic customer charge or the minimum system charge?
It makes a lot of difference for the rate design because of its impacts on the basic facilities charge. It also has the potential to make a difference, I would assume, and nobody addressed that in this case, in the intra-class.
My only question is the cost of service. Using just the cost of service, what is the difference between the basic customer charge and the minimum system method?
They both start with the same number, so they end up with the same number.
That was my question. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Whitfield.
Dr. Roof, you had a lot of exchange with Mr. Guile, and I think he jumped over one of the rates, as you said, the 1903 one, I think.
Right.
Where you, in your, I know a lot of your rebuttal or rebuttal was used up on that in exchange with him, but in your opinion, what do you think would be the most fair and equitable way? As Commissioner Howard says, once the revenue requirement is established, what do you think is the most fair and equitable way to resolve this?
I think you need to keep the basic facilities charge as low as you can.
Do you have a number? I know you said just witness Barnes' number, but do you have a number that you're putting forth?
I am not putting forth a number, although I think witness Barnes' number is very reasonable.
All right. Thank you, sir. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions, commissioners? Okay. Any redirect?
brief redirect, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Roof, why did ORS request you to provide testimony in this proceeding?
Well, to address the rate shift issues, and I assume because they know my background on low-income issues and those concerns.
And has ORS shared its concerns with you regarding the impact to low-income customers?
Only that they have those concerns.
And is rate design both an art and a science?
I think every witness who has addressed rate design has indicated that despite the methodology that you use, at the end you have to make adjustments based on other considerations. The company points to gradualism, for example. Witness Seaman Wynn points to gradualism. There are certainly social concerns as well in terms of fairness. So yes, it is more of an art than a science.
Thank you, Dr. Roof.
Thank you. Any recross? Okay, Dr. Roof, thank you for your testimony, and you may step down and be excused.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, next witness.
ORS calls as its next witnesses the panel of Dan Whitliff and Michael Seaman Wynn. And while the witnesses are taking the panel, ORS would like to thank the commission and the court reporter for allowing us to present these witnesses via panel. Mr. Seaman Wynn, please state your full name and occupation for the commission.
My name is Michael Seaman Wynn. I am a senior regulatory manager for the Office of Regulatory Staff.
And are you the same Michael Seaman Wynn who pre-filed 19 pages of direct testimony in this docket on March 4th, 2019?
Yes, I am.
Do you have any changes, edits, or corrections to your pre-filed direct testimony?
No, I do not.
And if I asked you the same questions today as was contained in your pre-filed direct testimony, would your answers remain the same?
Yes, they would.
Mr. Chairman, ORS asks that Mr. Seaman Wynn's pre-filed direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Seaman Wynn's pre-filed direct testimony will be entered into the record as though given orally from the stand.
Thank you. And Mr. Seaman Wynn, did you file as an attachment to your direct testimony a series of exhibits marked Exhibit MSH1 through Exhibit MSH5?
Yes.
Do you have any changes, edits, or corrections to any of those exhibits?
No, I do not.
Mr. Chairman, I'd ask now that Mr. Seaman Wynn's exhibits MSH1 through MSH5 for his direct testimony be entered into the record as if be marked for identification and entered into the record as the next composite hearing exhibits.
Mr. Seaman Wynn's exhibits MSH1 through MSH5 will be entered into the record as hearing exhibit number 57.
Thank you. And Mr. Seaman Wynn, did you also prepare 13 pages of surrebuttal testimony in this docket, which was filed with the Commission on March 25th, 2019?
Yes.
Do you have any changes, edits, or corrections to your pre-filed surrebuttal testimony?
No, I do not.
Mr. Chairman, ORS would ask that Mr. Seaman Wynn's pre-filed surrebuttal testimony be read into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Seaman Wynn's pre-filed surrebuttal testimony will be entered into the record as though given orally from the stand.
And Mr. Seaman Wynn, did you file a series of exhibits along with your surrebuttal testimony identified as surrebuttal exhibit MSH1 through surrebuttal exhibit MSH5?
Yes.
Do you have any changes, edits, or corrections to those exhibits?
No, I do not.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, I'd ask that Mr. Seaman Wynn's surrebuttal exhibits MSH1 through surrebuttal exhibit MSH5 be marked for identification and entered into the record as the next composite hearing exhibit.
Mr. Seaman Wynn's surrebuttal exhibits MSH 1 through 5 will be entered as hearing exhibit number 58.
And Mr. Chairman, if it pleases the Commission, I have a few questions and answers that summarize Mr. Seaman Wynn's direct and surrebuttal testimonies filed in this docket. Mr. Seaman Wynn, can you please outline what you addressed in your direct and surrebuttal testimonies?
Yes. My testimony addresses certain areas of ORS's examination of Duke Energy Progress's application. Specifically, I address the company's cost of service study, depreciation study, rate design, revenue verification, and revenue requirement distribution, the company's pro
Hang on
forma...
1 second. Do we have a copy of that, whatever we're doing here? That's okay. They didn't put it in front of you, sort of on the side.
Mr. Chairman, would it be helpful if I repeated the question?
Certainly.
Okay. Mr. Seaman Wynn, can you please outline what you addressed in your direct and surrebuttal testimonies?
Yes. My testimony addresses certain areas of ORS examination of Duke Energy Progress's application. Specifically, I addressed the company's cost of service study, depreciation study, rate design, revenue verification, and revenue requirement distribution, the company's pro forma adjustments pertaining to the company's calculation of the extra facilities charge, and ORS's customer growth calculation, the distribution of the additional revenue requirement and the proposed EDIT rider to customers, and the impact of the proposed rates on customers' bills.
And Mr. Seaman Wynn, what are your conclusions regarding ORS's review of the company's cost of service study?
ORS analyzed the company's cost of service study and concluded that for the purposes of this application, the methodology is reasonable. The methodology provides a reasonable assessment and allocation of the company's revenues, operating expenses, and rate-based items.
Do you have any additional recommendations to the Commission regarding the cost of service study?
Yes. ORS recommends that the Commission disallow recovery of coal ash management and disposal expenses related to North Carolina laws and regulations above and beyond federal regulations. It is ORS's position that South Carolina customers should be held harmless for the incremental cost differences attributable to the North Carolina state laws. For South Carolina customers to be subject to North Carolina state laws where they do not have a vote is equatable to taxation without representation.
And what is the resulting revenue increase recommended by ORS?
Based on ORS's adjustments, as addressed by ORS Witness Major, and a 9.30% ROE, as recommended by ORS Witness Parcell, ORS initially recommended the Commission approve a revenue increase to DEP of $30,562,000, excluding the refund from the EDIT rider. This recommendation was updated in my surrebuttal testimony. ORS's updated recommended revenue increase to the Commission for DEP is $32,130,000. The revenue increase for ORS's recommendation by customer class are reflected in my surrebuttal exhibit MSH1. ORS recommends that the revenues generated by the billing determinants not exceed the target revenue for each class as proposed in my surrebuttal exhibit MSH1. The overall retail increase, including ORS's proposed adjustments and the EDIT rider, is 3.88%. My surrebuttal exhibit MSH2 provides the resulting rate of return by customer class, taking into account ORS's proposed adjustments and excluding the EDIT rider. The overall rate of return for total retail is 5.68%. ORS recommends that any increase granted by the Commission be allocated in a manner such that the rates of return by class are equitable.
And what is ORS's recommendation regarding the company's proposed basic facilities charge?
The company has recommended changes to its existing tariff structure, including substantial increases to the basic facility charge for residential and small general service customers. The company's proposed increases do not follow the principle of gradualism in designing rates and tariffs. ORS recommends the Commission allow DEP to only increase the BFCs for the residential, small general service, and small general service constant load customers to recover up to 25% of the approved revenue increase. Using this methodology and ORS's revenue recommendation, the BFC would be $11.78 per month for residential customers, $12.34 per month for small general service customers, and $11.31 per month for small general service constant load customers, as shown on Surrebuttal Exhibit MSH3.
And Mr. Seaman-Wynn, are you aware of a letter filed by the company on March 26 regarding the proposed basic facility charges?
Yes, I am.
For residential, small general service, and small general service constant load customers?
Yes.
And does that letter accurately reflect ORS's position regarding the calculation of the BFC?
No, it does not.
Could you please explain?
The company is agreeing to the basic facility charge figures that I just read to this Commission. It is not ORS's recommendation that those be the basic facility charges for residential, small general service, and small general service constant load customers.
Mr. Seaman-Wynn, are you aware of a letter filed by the South Carolina Farm Bureau on April 9th regarding the proposed basic facility charge for medium general service customers?
Yes, I am.
What is ORS's position regarding the proposal put forth by the Farm Bureau?
Following the night hearings held in Florence and Sumter, ORS received inquiries and calls from the agricultural community expressing concern over the requested increase. Based on the testimony at the night hearings and these contacts, ORS supports the Farm Bureau's request to limit the increase to medium general service basic facility charge to an increase similar to that of the small general service basic facility charge. Based on ORS's adjustments, a 24.5% increase as recommended by the Farm Bureau results in a $21.38 basic facilities charge for the medium general service class.
And please discuss ORS's position regarding the proposed rate design changes put forth in the company's application.
It is ORS's position that it is premature to make the rate design changes proposed by the company as addressed in my surrebuttal testimony. ORS recommends that the Commission reject the changes I address as put forth by the company at this time. The company should wait until it has completed its deployment of advanced metering infrastructure and incorporate the data obtained from AMI into subsequent requests to change rate designs. If the company were to begin making changes to its rate designs regarding relationships between on-peak and off-peak and seasonal energy and demand charges, customers may respond and change their usage patterns. Then, when the company incorporates the information available from AMI and Customer Connect and offer customers new rate designs, customers who have adapted their usage may be confused and frustrated.
And what is the overall impact to a residential customer's bill using ORS's proposed adjustments?
Incorporating all ORS's adjustments and recommendations, the monthly bill for the typical residential customer on rate RES using 1,000 kilowatt hours will increase by approximately $6.71 or 5.5%, from $122.49 to approximately $129.20.
Thank you, Mr. Seaman-Wynn. Mr. Whitliff, would you please state your full name and occupation?
I'm Dan Whitliff, Managing Director of Environmental Services for GDS Associates in Austin, Texas.
And are you the same Dan Whitliff who pre-filed 46 pages of direct testimony in this docket on March 4th, 2019?
Yes.
Do you have any changes, edits, or corrections to your pre-filed direct testimony?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I beg your pardon. No.
And if I asked you today the same questions as those contained in your pre-filed direct testimony, would your answers remain the same?
Yes.
At this time, Mr. Chairman, ORS asks that Mr. Whitliff's pre-filed direct testimony be read into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Whitliff's pre-filed direct testimony will be read into the record as though given orally from the stand.
And Mr. Whitliff, did you file as an attachment to your direct testimony a series of exhibits marked Exhibit DJW1 through DJW9? 9.3, excuse me.
Yes.
Thank you. And do you have any changes, edits, or corrections to any of those exhibits?
Yes, I would like to remove Exhibit 5.2.1 and change the effective date in Exhibit 4.7.1, Row 2, Column 3, from 10/06/2016 to 10/19/2015.
Thank you, Mr. Whitliff. Mr. Chairman, may we approach the court reporter?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, we're currently handing the court reporter Mr. Whitliff's direct testimony exhibits, which are quite voluminous. We have separated them via paperclip. Additionally, they're labeled up top and on these binders in an effort to assist the court reporter. At this time, we would ask that these exhibits be marked for identification and entered into the record as the next composite hearing exhibit.
Mr. Whitliff's exhibits with the corrections noted in his last statement will be entered as exhibit number 59.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Whitliff, did you also prepare 11 pages of surrebuttal testimony in this docket, which was filed with the Commission on March 25th, 2019?
Yes.
Do you have any changes, edits, or corrections to your pre-filed surrebuttal testimony?
Yes, I do. On page 7, line 3, 2.16 million should be changed to 2.016 million. And additionally, on page 7, line 5, 2.16 million should be changed to 2.016 million.
Thank you, Mr. Whitliff. Mr. Chairman, ORS requests that Mr. Whitliff's pre-filed surrebuttal testimony be read into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Whitliff's pre-filed surrebuttal testimony will be entered into the record as though given orally from the stand.
Thank you. And Mr. Whitliff, did you also file as an attachment to your surrebuttal testimony a series of exhibits marked as surrebuttal exhibit DJW1 through surrebuttal exhibit DJW4?
Yes.
Do you have any changes, edits, or corrections to any of those exhibits?
No.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, I'd ask that Mr. Whitliff's surrebuttal exhibits DJW1 through surrebuttal exhibit DJW4 be marked for identification and entered into the record as the next composite hearing exhibit.
Mr. Whitliff's surrebuttal exhibits DJW1 through 4 will be entered as hearing exhibit number 60.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, if it pleases the Commission, I have a few questions and answers that summarize Mr. Whitliff's direct and surrebuttal testimonies. Mr. Whitliff, have you ever testified before the South Carolina Public Service Commission?
Yes. I testified before the South Carolina Public Service Commission on March 25th, 2019 in the matters relating to Duke Energy Carolina's rate case in docket number 2018-319-E.
Mr. Whitliff, briefly describe your background and experience.
I have a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from Southern Methodist University and a master's degree in business administration from the University of Oklahoma. I'm a licensed professional engineer, licensed to practice in Texas, Tennessee, and South Carolina. I've been a licensed professional engineer since 1980. I'm also a board-certified environmental engineer with the American Academy of Environmental Engineers and Scientists, where I served as a trustee from 2010 to 2015. I'm past president of the Texas Society of Professional Engineers and a past president of the National Society of Professional Engineers, where I currently chair the Committee on Policy and Advocacy, which promotes positions of interest to professional engineers around the country. My career in power began in 1981 when I went to work for West Texas Utilities as a results engineer. I was an assistant superintendent, that's the operations supervisor for a gas plant, and then I became the plant engineering supervisor at a coal plant during the startup and initial operations. I was promoted to environmental manager for the utility where I served until 1995, when I moved to Austin to become the first chief engineer of the Texas Natural Resource Conservation Commission. That's the senior technical officer in an organization second in size to EPA as an environmental regulator. I was there for 4.5 years as the chief engineer, and then I went into consulting. I've been with GDS, my current employer, since 2007.
And when were you retained by ORS?
We were approached and retained in the spring of 2017, but our work didn't actually begin until May 2017.
And Mr. Whitliff, what was the purpose of your review in this docket?
GDS was engaged by ORS to answer a wide array of questions regarding the cost impacts of the company's CCR disposal and remediation activities. More specifically, we were asked to determine the marginal impact of the North Carolina Coal Ash Management Act of 2014 and any subsequent amendments on CCR remediation and disposal cost. CAMA was passed in response to the February 2014 ash spill at Duke's Dam River Generating Plant and 6 decades of ash mismanagement in North Carolina.
Mr. Whitliff, under what underlying principle did you base your review?
GDS relied upon the South Carolina regulatory context provided by ORS early on in our work. As stated in my direct testimony, I understood, quote, "It is the position of ORS that cost incurred as the result of jurisdictional laws should not lead to increased cost outside that jurisdiction." End quote. This matter is addressed in the cost of service testimony of ORS witness Seaman Wynn. CAMA, being too costly, did not play a role in my recommendations.
Mr. Whitliff, was determining the impacts of CAMA a complicated process?
Yes. The costs associated with CCR remediation and closure are affected in material ways by a complex set of court cases, consent agreements, commission decisions, federal rules, state regulations, as well as state laws such as CAMA and its subsequent amendments. While determining with great precision the CCR cost increases created by CAMA, above and beyond what the federal rules require, is a difficult task, I made what I believe is a good faith calculation of those impacts.
And in what ways did CAMA increase coal combustion residual costs?
I found that CAMA increased CCR-related costs in 3 ways at DEP plants. First, expenditures for plants not covered at all by the CCR rules. That would include Cape Fear is falling into that category. The second is for closure excavation options not required under the CCR rules, but required under CAMA or North Carolina court decisions. Cape Fear, H.F. Lee, and Witherspoon fall into this category. And third, expenditures for actions that would not have been required at this time under the CCR rules, but are subject to accelerated schedules under CAMA. Asheville and Sutton fall under this category.
And Mr. Whitliff, what information did you rely on to make your recommendations?
In quantifying these cost impacts, I relied on information obtained during my site visits to the company's coal-fired power plants and CCR impoundments. My review of relevant and state and federal laws and regulations, my evaluation of company responses to data requests relevant to CCR management practices, and my review of other documents relevant to CCR management and remediation. Some or all of the expenses sought by DEP for compliance at 5 DEP plants result solely from CAMA or South Carolina, and South Carolina's ratepayers should not have to pay for increased costs due solely as a result of North Carolina laws.
And can you please explain Table 5.4 from your direct testimony?
Table 5.4 in my direct testimony is what is being sought for recovery, my recommended disallowances, and the premise on which that recommendation is based. I recommend that the Commission disallow at this time $333,480,308 of the $635,040,092 in ARO deferrals being requested by the company in this proceeding. Please note that no disallowance is recommended for Mayo or Roxborough at this time, whose closures were not increased as a result of CAMA in this proceeding. In addition, no disallowance was recommended for Robinson, which was closed under a consent agreement with South Carolina DHEC.
Mr. Whitliff, is your calculation of allowable costs reliable and supportable?
Yes, I've had sufficient time to analyze the data provided by the company and an additional year of data on which to base my recommendation.
And under what basis are you recommending a disallowance at the Cape Fear site?
The current CCR rules apply only to sites that were active as of October 19, 2015. Cape Fear was not impacted by the CCR rule and was designated for closure under CAMA. Cape Fear was designated as a beneficiation site under CAMA, and all of the costs incurred to date at Cape Fear were entirely the result of CAMA.
Mr. Whitliff, under what basis are you recommending a disallowance at the H.F. Lee and Witherspoon sites?
H.F. Lee and Witherspoon had additional costs associated with beneficiation above and beyond what the federal rules, federal CCR requirements. I would also like to note that I do not recommend for disallowance all of the costs at these sites. Only the additional incremental costs that I have identified were above and beyond the federal CCR requirements.
Is beneficiation generally more expensive than other closure options?
Yes.
Were you able to identify any net savings at Cape Fear and H.F. Lee sites as compared to closure without beneficiation?
No, and no supporting information was provided that could substantiate the claim. The basis for comparison was not provided and is not likely a direct comparison to the federal CCR requirements.
Mr. Whitliff, why do you recommend a disallowance of costs at Asheville and Sutton?
Much of the cost at Asheville and Sutton were the result of accelerated timelines as caused by being designated high priority sites by CAMA. The designation of a high priority site under CAMA required DEP to meet an August 1st, 2019 closure deadline to dispose of the CCR at these sites. I would like to note that I do not recommend the disallowance of all the costs at these sites. Only additional incremental incurred costs that I've identified were the direct result of CAMA.
And was that August 1st, 2019 deadline an accelerated deadline?
Yes.
Mr. Whitliff, can you provide an example of the additional costs that were incurred at Sutton as a result of CAMA?
Yes, an example of those costs is the 2.016 million tons of CCR that were hauled by truck or rail to the Brickhaven mine from Sutton to meet the accelerated August 1st, 2019 deadline at Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Whitliff. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Whitliff, and Mr. Seaman-Wynn are available for questions from opposing counsel and the commission. Thank you.
Okay, we'll get to that after we have a break. Now, Ms. Grumman, did you have a request? Okay, you want to do from lunch. Okay, I just thought it was going to be in the break, so just want to make sure we got you going if you needed to be. Okay, we're going to break for about 10 minutes. Thank you. Then we'll resume.